in his new book, The Emancipation of Evan Walls. Award-winning author and television director Jeffrey Blunt takes us back to the past, back to 1968. Before his book released next month, Jeffrey's here today to share his inspiration behind his third novel. Good to have you with us,
Thank you.
Jeffrey.
It's nice to be here, Melanie.
Well, so Evan, who is Evan Walls, first of all?
Well, we meet Evan in the South in 1968, and he is young, he is intellectually gifted, and he's black. And because of that description, he finds himself navigating a very difficult and painful path between two very different cultures. On the one hand, he is the uppity N-word, which a black child in the South at that time would not be surprised to be called. On the other hand, he is quite surprised and has his world rocked by the African-American community's response to his intellectual pursuits.
Which is?
He is referred to as acting white, or the Uncle Tom, and he spends the rest of his youth and much of his adult life trying to answer the question as to whether or not he is black enough to be allowed membership in his own community or his own culture.
So if you're a smart kid and you like school and you like to read and learn, then you get criticized for it from your own community.
You get criticized for it, and you know, it's typical of kids to be called a nerd or the bookworm and that kind of thing. The difference here is when your culture is brought into it, when you're no longer allowed to be a part of your culture or a part of your community. It takes it to a different level. And that's why we have, in the last couple of years, African-American middle schoolers who are taking their own lives because of this issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who was the inspiration for your character, Evan Wall?
Well, there have been many. I have experienced this myself. But
Is this your story?
It is
Are you Evan?
No, I'm partially Evan. I will admit to the fact that I've been through this. But it wasn't until much later that I started to read about other children who were going through this. And my mom was a teacher. And so I was sitting and talking to my mom about this. And she said, well, you write, so this is a story you need to write. You need to bring this out of the shadows so we can talk about this issue.
So partially your story and partially a blend of others' experiences.
Yeah, because if I'd written my story, I see it as a nonfiction book, it's easier to take one person's story and set it aside as an isolated incident. Well, typically I think when authors write about an issue or write a story, people receive it in a broader term and they think about the issue at large rather than the one individual.
And you set your book in 1968.
Yeah.
I mean, you couldn't have picked a more turbulent time in America's history.
Absolutely.
And especially for the civil rights movement. Why did you pick that year?
Well, and you mentioned the civil rights movement leads us to desegregation and integration of schools. Well, it turns out that this is when the acting white phenomenon actually starts to happen. So what happens is schools are integrated. Black principals, black vice principals, administrators lose their jobs. Those jobs are given to white principals, administrators, and so forth. Those white principals and administrators set the curriculum. They set the tracking in the school, so you have a track for the intellectual kids and the kids who are struggling. Most of the kids in the intellectual track are white. So the African American kids see this as something that's held from them. They take a negative reaction to that. And so it becomes white to be in that.
Sounds like a lot of lessons for
it's a lot of
everyone,
yes.
No matter your ethnicity in this book.
Exactly.
All right, you've got an event coming up. Is this
Yes.
a book signing?
It is. It's at Politics and Prose on this Sunday at 3 p.m.
Okay, and so you can come out and meet the author. And then when can we get your book, and how do we get your book?
Well, you can pre-order now on Amazon, your bookstore, Barnes & Noble, and it releases on June 15th.
Well, we wish you the best of success with your new book.
Thank you so much.
And once again, it's called The Emancipation of Evan Wall, and the author is Jeffrey Blunt, who spent 34 years as a director at NBC News.
That's right, yeah.
And is now retired and
Happily
writing
so.
and probably more books in the future. Good to have you with us,
Thank you
Jeff.
so much for having me.